Welcome everyone. Today is January 15th, and this is Kubernetes Steering Committee public monthly meeting. We have a couple of topics on the agenda. Quick announcements for the starters. The governing board elections are on. The steering committee is voting, and the deadline for the voting is basically January 26th. After that, we will be announcing the results. Code of conduct elections will be happening in February. We're still awaiting nominations for candidates. And the last announcement is the 2024 annual reports. We will be kicking the reports later this week. I've already generated the boilerplates for all the special interest groups and for all the work groups. There's a PR linked in the agenda as well. And if all goes well, we will be targeting February 28th as the deadline for submitting annual reports, which basically gives 6 weeks for everyone to complete their annual reports. This is somewhere in the middle between the enhancement phase, which is planned for February 14th, if I remember correctly. It might shift one way or the other because the PR is still
Yeah,
um
the
is
PR is still
longer.
pending. I've
Yeah,
asked. So Nina has basically been working through some of the review comments. I've asked Grace and Kat, who are sub-project leads for release team, to just do another sweep now that we've had a bunch of
right.
comments come in and confirm on the code-free states. I think the code-free states are the last pending kind of,
Yes, exactly. Based on
negotiation point.
yeah,
Um,
John was basically pushing all the way to 20th.
so 20th or so, yeah.
Yeah, but from what I was talking with Kat, she was okay with what I was proposing, that it'll be 14th, so basically a week prior to what John is saying, but it'll
hmm
be a week later than
I think it splits the difference between the two things that were
yes. So
proposed,
it's
right?
like
Yeah.
literally in the middle, and I think that also matched what we had in the past over the past several releases, which
Cool.
is 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah,
For matching the
so within the
deadline.
next week or so, we should have the release schedule out. And then should be able to get some move on that.
So yeah, so basically the deadline for the annual reports is fitting like in the middle of between those two dates. And we would really like to finish it by then and then be able to use the inputs from the annual reports for our presentation and AMA steering during KubeCon Europe in London. So I'll be sending emails and opening issues shortly today and tomorrow. I know that I have to make them in batches because apparently I'm not able to open that many issues in one go. Okay, so I believe we can jump over to Rita's topic. So
Hi,
Rita, you're there.
sorry, just looking for the unmute button. Yeah, so if y'all could open up the document real quick, this is just a continuation of the last call we had. Um, we definitely went back and addressed all the comments. And if you could scroll down to the proposal section, this is the bulk of the change. Basically, if you're looking at the acceptance workflow, right, is assuming a project foo opens a PR against that particular repo that is owned by SRC. SRC maintains a PR template for the project to fill in. If you could scroll down a bit, uh, based on the acceptance criteria listed above, right? Um, and that um, and that basically maps to SIG owners must also evaluate and certify the project readiness, ensuring that there's there's feature graduation status, similar to Kubernetes API review process. Project uses graduation status like alpha, beta, GA for new features. Things like project has regular release process and some release cadence. And then project uses CI, a proud for CI instead of GitHub Action. Last but not least, security contacts, right? Each project must have designated one or more security contacts. So assuming all of those criteria are met, then the PR can only be merged after receiving SIG sponsorship and SRC approval. So at a minimum, 2 explicit LGTMs. And then once the PR is approved, before the PR is approved, it's possible that there's some back and forth, including explanation of what requirements have not been met, and what the project needs to work on, right? And once the PR is approved, then the project gets added to the SRC in scope list. The project maintainers can then update their own README or security README to include the SRC accepted status. And one thing that there was a comment on the side from Tim about is this just a checklist? You know, does SRC reserve the right to evaluate and potentially reject due to reasons not listed in the checklist? And so I think we can make that more explicit. And I think the checklist serves as a minimum bar. But SRC reserves the right to reject for other reasons. And we hope that the checklist will continue to evolve as we learn. And also, Paco suggested that SRC should create a pre-select list of projects that we can perhaps pilot this with. I think that's a great idea, and I've included that in the proposal section as well. So any feedback before we talk about next steps? What do y'all think?
We have yeah, go ahead.
No, go for it, Matcha.
Do we have a list of initial projects, which is kind of similar to what Paco said, although Paco was basically alluding about the piloting projects. I'm more asking, do we have a list of projects that have to be there from day one?
I think that's a great idea, and I think we should. For example, KK, right? Like core, obviously. So we could start with that, just like really dumb, but also add some core things that we know would pass this process, basically, and then test it, right? Test it with the SIG owners and make sure. Oh, I just realized my camera's not on for some reason. Okay, anyway, ignoring that for a second. Then I think piloting with few projects would hopefully improve this process and make sure this is the right call. And then, you know, so I do think that's the right next step. And obviously I think next step would be like create the actual PR template, make sure y'all also take a look and give feedback. And then we can just start with a pilot with few projects.
Go ahead, Stephen.
My question was about next steps, and seems it was answered. So.
Yay.
Patrick, you can go, but I've noticed you were trying to speak, but you were muted, or we couldn't hear you.
Oh, wrong microphone again.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Now? Yeah.
Yes.
Rita, you keep saying Kubernetes core, and I think there is a pending question from Ben, and I think I raised the same one before. What exactly is Kubernetes core? Because even in the KK repository, we have tools that we don't ship to users. Like I don't know, some helper templating tool that we run internally to do some stuff. Is that core Kubernetes? Do we care? Perhaps we don't. but even then, this core Kubernetes definition that is, or term that is used here, I think should still be defined somewhere. I don't think that part has
That's a
been
good
done.
call out. And I think that needs to be further clarified in the doc, but just for this conversation, if you can click on that link, right? So that's kind of what we use for HackerOne, just to tell people the different tiers for bounties. But as you can see from tier 1, right, where it says core Kubernetes, tier 1 includes GA beta feature for core Kubernetes. And so
But
anything
what is core Kubernetes here?
So I think
I'm reading.
I think maybe the delineation, and this is something that we ran into with
Okay.
enhancements as well, the delineation between in tree and out of tree.
Okay.
So I think components that go into what people call Kubernetes would be considered core, right? So KK and the surrounding components. But I think, one could argue that, maybe for the pilot, we should include like release engineering stuff as well, since it goes into making Kubernetes.
Okay, well, I see that the Kubernetes own core dependencies that kind of defines it, but well, it's yeah. I guess when we look at some specific example, it could be decided. But I think for this purpose, it might be good to really spell out the whole list.
Yeah, I would support like making explicit information that this is what we care about and whatnot that could solve potential problems in the future. And that will also match with what I was asking about the initial list of which are the ones that we care about.
Sounds good. And again, we can pilot this in the initial PR with all the core things in there. And hopefully that will be good enough as a first onboard opt-in, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? I believe we can go to the implementation plan. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, it was going to be a general question, like, Rita, what do you need from us next, basically?
I'll leave it up to you, Rita, whether you want to answer whatever Stephen was trying to ask, or if you want to
Sorry, what was the question?
implementation first.
What do you need from us specifically next?
I think I need y'all to review. So both the PR template as well as the first PR, I think. For example, the list, the first list that we start from might not be conclusive. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some bike shedding going on a bit. So hopefully that would be so that's where we would need your like sort of feedback and then make sure has good coverage since it's the sort of the baseline, right? Yeah.
There is some friction, at least I think that Ben was with me, on the implementation of make this something visible. So I think that being part of security or not don't should be something that can attract projects to get the badge, because that will incentivize the wrong behavior from the project.
Was that a question for me?
It's a comment. I mean, for the other thing, I think that the right next step is take a pilot with the more important project we consider and go through the template and harden that and see if we are, I don't know, we need to iterate. But then in the next phase, the implementation plan seems to advocate to a more visibility of making being part of the security committee something special. And in the past, these behaviors made that the people try to get the badge and instead of just for publicity, instead of for the right thing. That is, we want the project to be more secure. So
Mhm.
my question is why do we need to promote this? And it's just not a special security contact like Ben was suggesting there, and then we handle like we handle today.
Yeah,
I,
and sorry, go
uh,
for it, Rita.
no, go ahead.
I know we had some initial discussions about the badging too, and I do think that from the security perspective, like security to MD is canonical for most of this stuff. I'm also questioning the value of the badge introduction. I'm not really sure where we landed on that in the last call, but I don't think it's strictly required.
So for the badge thing, I think we landed on, um, adding, where is it? Hold on a second. Yeah, SRC accepted status, right? Once approved. So this is number 2 under the proposal. Once approved, the project is added to the list of SRC accepted repository in the SRC repo, and project owner can add SRC supported, like kind of like a label or whatever in the project security markdown file.
So one thing I'll call out is now that we're on Kubernetes is on GitHub Enterprise, we can also leverage some of the custom properties for repos. And that I think the fact that that is not that the custom properties won't really be curated by repo maintainers, but instead by org admins might be a better route.
We should
Well,
talk to the GitHub management team about that. If we can make that something that's centrally managed, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think if it's in security.md, people won't be as incentivized for the idea of like, oh, I just want a shiny badge in my README to make my project look more super extra official. But I think people putting in security.md will be more likely doing that because they're pursuing security. I'm fine with that. Also, I'm sorry I missed so much of this. I'm dealing with some vision issues.
so from a advertising perspective, like let's say we go through the initial baseline of projects. I guess like maybe Antonio, that was your question, or maybe that's Steven's comment too, is how do we make this more widely known or discoverable, I guess? Since this is a new process, right?
In the project or like the process for repos to do?
The process, yeah.
Dev at Kubernetes.io plus the chairs and tech leads meetings. The chairs and tech leads meetings are a really good way. Like that's
Okay.
usually how steering would start populating on meetings, because even if everybody that needs to do it isn't there, the chairs and tech leads should be, further reaching out to their like sub projects and stuff to poke them between those roles.
Right.
And then dev at makes sure that everybody has the, if you mail it to like dev at Kubernetes.io as an announcement, that makes sure that everybody has the chance to see it. But there is a little bit more noise there. So the chairs and tech leads is bringing that to a couple of those meeting instances is a really high signal way to get it to some of the like leadership.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay, cool. Thank you so much for the feedback.
Sorry, I was. When is the what is the timeline for the prototype?
Whenever any one of us has time.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, if it's like, as you can
Like
see, I'm the only person from SRC on this call today. So like, it's literally whoever has time can squeeze time and can move the needle, I guess.
No, it's just we were talking about now the has been freeze and all the thing is just to try to not overlap all the things at the same time. But well, if you are in the same boat, as all of us. So I imagine that
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I
not going
think,
to be disruptive.
yeah, I think hopefully there's enough motivation in SRC to push this forward, because it helps ensure that we have enough bandwidth to like triage real issues, right? Like that's kind of that's the real motivation, right? And to ensure we have the right context for these reports and etc. But obviously this proposal is like more work for everybody, right? So yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so you once this stuff is out, I think, you know, your review and feedback will be really great. And then hopefully we will be at a good stage where we can actually reach out to SIGLEs and the dev mailing list to start the whole thing.
Cool. Thank you very much, Rita.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. I know we bike shed this a lot, but I think this is a really important initiative.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, the reminder of this call was meant to answer the questions that we got during KubeCon AMA back from Salt Lake City, which we didn't get the time to address last time. So before we jump to that, I'll ask one more time if there are any other topics. I don't know, Christoph, do you have any topics that you want to ask or discuss before we jump over to the remaining questions?
No, nothing specific for me today.
Okay. I copied over the questions that were not answered, and we can just cover them one by one. So whoever is interested in, feel free to jump in to answer that. What can we do to support one another as a human so that talented contributors stay around in the community over a long term, despite personal barriers, job changes, etc.?
Ooh, this one's really important to me. Um, I think that one of the things that I always do is when I see people doing a lot and I feel like they're feeling really responsible for things and really stretching themselves, I remind people that I just try to reach out and give them a gentle private nudge that I appreciate what they're doing, but like, take care of themselves and don't overdo it, don't overstress. I especially see from some of our more junior contributors that start to get into like leadership roles that they feel really ultra responsible for, like there's an issue and it's affecting people and I have to fix this right away, and they're like working through the weekend and like just reminding people that actually if they want to help the project, it's better for us if they don't burn out and to like take care of themselves. I think that kind of like just very human check-in with people is important.
Ben, I love that you answered it first because I mean, so much history in the project, but also like we weren't always here doing this. And I think we've all, seen in our respective governance areas and project that like this can happen, right? And outside of I think the human touch points, the building up resiliency within our groups, I think that contributor to maintainer arc is always hard. So spending the extra time to build in processes, because I very, very often we see people diving in much harder when something is unexplained or something is emergent, right? So the emergent things are kind of harder to immediately mitigate with documentation or processes. But there's a lot that we can fix by better explaining what we do, right? And better building support. So I think, shameless plug, I think SIG Release has done a good job with the handbooks and various, processes that we have around this stuff. And it does help people onboard to our part of the project a lot faster than normal. I think if, outside of the documentation, having that, open communication about what people are working on, checking in with people outside of just the, hey, we need this issue completed, or we need this issue moved forward. I think is really important. So that personal touch is huge.
I think there's also one additional aspect, especially with regards to the last part of the question about job changes, because not every one of us are so lucky to be supported by our employers to work on open source. And we have multiple contributors that, due to various circumstances, ended up in a companies that do not support that, which basically means for them that they either gonna sacrifice their own personal time in favor of the project. And this is why what Ben said in the beginning is so critical. The best option that we can do to support one another is the person have to be open about that his contributions will be very limited because he cannot afford to do it on a daily basis. He will try to do whatever he can because the people that has been with us for so many months and years and releases, though those people have a lot of historical knowledge that sometimes isn't written, and we need to make sure that they are able to continue participate, even though if their participation time and the scope of their participation will be limited, and we should be reminding them that they should not try to stretch themselves too thin. And on top of that, for those cases where people cannot be supported by the employers, we have the CNCF um, um, I forgot the word, uh, but we have the options for CNCF to support those people coming over for KubeCons, where scholarship was the word that I was missing. We have CNCF scholarships that help people to attend KubeCons and be connected with the community and be part of that community. And that I think it's very important. Cool. I think we covered that one.
I think the
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
the emeritus role that we added is also related and something we encourage and something that we have to do ourselves. Like as someone that's supported to work in open source, but that doesn't mean that I have unlimited time to work on everything, and it kind of accrues over time. So I've tried to make a point to like step down in a few places to show the example of like you can put yourself as emeritus instead of an owner of something, and pending approval from the current ones, you can step back later. We've documented that you own this. Uh, that doesn't always work, like when we use aliases and things, and I think we need to iterate on it a little bit more. But I think that concept has been helpful and is something that we should continue to promote. That like it's okay to step down from some things, and that doesn't also have to be permanent, and that you should do that to protect your time and balance.
Moving on to the next question. What advice or plans do you current steering committee members have to help the next steering committee members prepare for their role and run for election?
Just gonna wait a minute and see if you went. Uh, I'm always encouraging people to take on uh, volunteer roles that are very like wide in the org. They're very broad. The release team is one of the really great places. Some of those parts like helping out with the CI, the docs. There are a couple of places in the project where we're more horizontal than vertical, and I think we have some contributors that are doing really great work, but they're so focused in a vertical like Upicon storage, where some folks working in other parts of the project might not ever really interact with that much. And so working in one of those broader roles not only makes you like more familiar to the rest of the community, which is they're more likely to vote for you, but it gets you that exposure to what's going on across the project. So you're better prepared to represent the community. I think if you look, almost everyone that gets elected to steering, you can kind of trace back that they've spent a fair bit of time in something like release, contributor experience, testing and the CI parts where you're working with and helping out kind of across the whole project, so that when you're going into steering, you've already been exposed to like all of the subgroups and helped out a lot of people and kind of seen what the problems are.
Yeah.
Other
So
examples. Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it. Go for
Steven.
it. Go for it. You got it.
So the other examples that, aside from what Ben mentioned, that are maybe not as obvious, but are equally visible, is the contributor summit happening twice or a couple of times over KubeCons. Those are very visible roles where people can actually have, because you will be interacting with multiple SIGs and work groups, whether that will be to get input about the awards, about announcing the schedule, preparing the rooms, or during the release, there's the production readiness. Those are people who are actually going through all of the enhancements. And currently that group is 5 approvers, and we have a bunch of additional shadows who can step up into the role, which gives you a broader overview of the project from a technical standpoint, but you also have, you're basically putting yourself in a visible spot. Patrick, go ahead. You were first with your hands.
So this talks about getting people ready and knowledgeable enough in the project to be successful in the steering committee. That's worthwhile. I think we should also perhaps mention again that all of us have pretty much volunteered to advise people who want to learn about this role in private, in chat. I think we mentioned that at KubeCon, but it applies here as well. So if you want to learn more what it means to be a steering committee member, you can always reach out to others and just ask. We'd certainly be happy to help there. And of course, we also have documentation that helps people on board, but that is also public. So people who want to know about steering committee can look up our steering committee repo and go through some of the docs that explain some of the business day-to-day things or things that we do that are documented. Not everything is documented, but some is.
Go ahead, Steven.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand that like steering may not necessarily be your next logical step, right? I think there are some people that like, oh, this is the terminal, and I think maybe when I was initially interested in it, maybe that's a thing that I had in mind. Like, this is the terminal role for the community. This is the top of what I can do, right? I think the only similarities between the committees, right, that we have is the scope, right? In that the committee is covering some area of importance for the entire project as opposed to just a specific area of the project. But I think we also see this kind of conversation come up in leadership discussions between like chairs and tech leads. Those are 2 fundamental roles, right? And there are 2 areas of the brain that work a little differently. I think you can be an excellent tech lead and maybe a terrible chair, right? And vice versa. But steering is not functionally a technical role. I think it's really important to understand that. I think it's a great opportunity to I think there's some things that again to some of the points made earlier. It's any one of us is happy to step through the conversation of what this role is actually like on an individual basis. But I do think that there are some things that you don't realize you're going to be working on until you work on them, right? And I think that is maybe one of the core functions of what we do. We handle, we're sometimes handling emergent issues, or we're creating process in the absence of process for the community, and then figuring out how to delegate that away. But I think I think it's really important to realize that steering is not like any other role within this community. And I think there are lots of ways that people can be effective in the community that are not running for steering. But I do agree with the points that Mache made earlier, and I think that we made some of those on stage as well. Around it is really helpful to figure out how to do to figure out roles that are visible to the community, right? Cross-functional roles do help your chances. You should not run because like this was not meant to be a popularity contest. You should not be running for those reasons. Run because you care deeply about the community and how it is run, not because you want to be highly visible.
Go ahead, Ben.
Also, just adding that, I think we should call out that we have two other committees. We have Code of Conduct and Security Response, and Code of Conduct is another very like people and process oriented one, and Security Response is a very technical oriented one that are very broad across the community that also need people to work on those, in addition to roles like chair and tech lead. So there's a lot of other ways that you can kind of do some very high level involvement in the project other than this that should also be considered.
I'll close the question with a paraphrase from Pirates of the Caribbean. Once a steering, always a steering. Ben was actually talking about the Emeritus Steering Committee has a group of Emeritus steering, which basically every single one of us, after its term is done, is ending up as an emeritus. And not only you can ask and talk to the current steering members, but you can also ask the previous steering members. Why is that important? Every steering member is dealing with different issues. Like Stephen mentioned, we are creating processes that did not exist before. So if you ask Christoph, who's on the call and was previously a steering member, he was probably dealing with different issues and problems that we are currently dealing with. And our experiences will be different. So the best option for you to learn, if you're curious to learn more, is to ask various people from various times of the steering committee. You'll get a very broad overview, but at the end of the day, be prepared to be surprised with what awaits on the job. Okay, so with that, we will move to the next question. Kubernetes users depend on adjacent projects, some of which are consistently maintained. Do we have a framework for exploring adoptions of projects? Should we?
I thought we talked about this one.
I was gonna say we did address some of this,
but I believe we talked about it on Slack, but we didn't cover that on the recording.
No,
I
we
could have
covered it
sworn
in the panel, but we can go over it
Okay.
again.
No.
But we went into the etcd thing quite a bit actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So,
I remember the gist of our response was like, we don't really have a framework. We don't expect this to happen very often, but it is something that we're pretty actively talking about, and there is at least one that is being explored at the moment.
Okay, that's fair. We can skip that question in that case.
So I mean, I will say that we have. I think as we explore options for sustainability in projects, like we have our local issues, right? From from governance group to governance group that we have to tackle as well. And there is no one right solution. I think that etcd was interesting, and I'm sure we'll discover something else that is at some point, maybe I know we're having discussions about one project in particular and their release cadence, which I won't mention on the recorded call. But I do think it's a case by case basis. We will. I think it's definitely like if we can provide what is helpful to other projects is that we as Kubernetes kind of provide an exemplar for what a lot of projects do in the cloud native community. So I think it is important for us to set a good example by having sustainable maintainer processes, so that we can say like the way that we're helping is showing you exactly what we do, right? Sometimes that may become adopting a new or an existing project into our governance structure, but I think that I would say that that is more an exception than what I would expect to happen day to day.
Okay. So jumping over to the next one. Will we ever get over our absolute disdain and fear for making breaking changes that we all agree are wrong in hindsight and would do differently if we could go back in time?
This is a technical question. Oh, I'm sorry, Steven.
I, oh yeah, what this is, I think overbroad, and we also talked about this a little bit in the panel, in that my consideration around Kubernetes is that we're not at version 1, 2, 2, 3, right? We've released multiple major versions, in my opinion, right? People ask about like what Kubernetes 2.0 looks like. I think we've already passed it, right? So I think from various places in the project, SIGs are going to set the pace around the sub projects that they maintain. I don't know if this question is referring specifically to core Kubernetes, but I think SIGs should be empowered to set the pace about how breaking changes are defined and how we step through them.
Ben?
Yeah, I think this is something that's really on people's minds, but is exactly the sort of thing that like this is not in scope for steering. This is more of like a SIG architecture question. It's something that I know I've been talking to people about, but not with my like steering hat on. We delegate this sort of um like there's a big misconception with a lot of people that steering like steers the project in every possible way, and more like we're establishing the space for the project to work and then immediately delegating off like Kate Semper is going to manage all the infrastructure resources and Contravex is going to work on the contributor workflow, and architecture owns like these super broad ambiguous technical questions, and API review, and so talking about something like API change is something we can be interested in as people are involved in the project, but not something that we should be trying to dictate from steering.
Patrick?
I think that you're right that we have delegated that power, but as steering committee, I think we are still the go-to point for external people who tell the project that we are too strict and that they would be willing to accept breaking changes. And then we can take that feedback and push it back into the various SIGs. I don't think we should be doing this. Perhaps we should really just accept that Kubernetes has been successful and any breaking change will break someone, and therefore we shouldn't be doing it. But I think the question is not necessarily wrong by itself. I just suspect that the answer has to be that, well, we've made these mistakes, people depend on them now, and we just can't make those changes anymore. I think that is the position that I've seen in SIG API reviews. And I think I don't see that changing. So that would be perhaps my answer to this question, whether it's a steering member or as a potential API reviewer.
I guess I think it's important to discuss, but I think it's the sort of thing that we like feature and API evolution and the stability are topics that we kind of have been discussing a bit, but that forum has been SIG architecture, and I think that that's correct.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's just that we could have input on it, but we probably shouldn't discuss it here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I would actually encourage like anyone remotely interested in this and especially steering members to participate, but I wouldn't do it in the steering meeting because then we won't have all the other folks that should be talking about it.
Definitely. But the next question is definitely for us. Are there any plans to lessen the restrictions to qualify to vote for steering elections? Go ahead, Stephen.
I'll be honest. I would love some specificity around this question. I know that we're not necessarily going to get it from the initial submitter, but I don't think it's hard to qualify at this point, right? We've made various improvements to to capture especially the contributions from non-code contributors over the years, and I think it is fairly easy to qualify to vote or run. So and we have the we have the requirements listed, and I think the team is very thoughtful about the way that exception requests are handled. If you think that you're a contributor to Kubernetes, you should submit an exception request. And the goal of the exception request is really to get to the point where the exceptions are written into the rules, right? So like usually an exception that's submitted, from the I think one great example is that we had committee members, right, from SRC or Code of Conduct Committee submitting exceptions to be able to vote, and they are community members, they're standing committee members. It makes sense that they should be able to vote. So now that they can, right? So I don't think our process is arduous in terms of voter qualification, but I would love to hear more about where people think we can make improvements.
Antonio?
Yeah, that's something that I also agree with Stephen. If you see the rules for be member of Kubernetes, they are not so. You just need to comment on bugs, help, or I don't know, even just only triaging or something like that. But it's not the first time that I heard the same. It's hard to be so. It would be nice if somebody can do the exercise and ask these people what they find hard. Because as I say, I don't think that it's hard. It's just commenting in GitHub issues is valid to get membership.
Ben?
Yeah. We actually already have a process where if anyone doesn't meet the community member plus minimum participation on GitHub to be auto included, that you can just submit a request and say, hey, I've been contributing in this way. And pretty much, and my understanding is that like we've pretty much generally accepted those. Like if you're, if you have some involvement with the project, we're letting you in. I don't think I've seen evidence that people who are participating in the Kubernetes organization have not been able to vote. The automatic requirement is pretty lax as well. People tend to raise things like, oh, what about non-code rules? And it's like, but we do like everything through GitHub. Like it's very difficult to participate in the project and not comment on an issue or we manage so many things that way, like docs. If you're contributing to docs, that's all in Git too. It's all on GitHub. It's not just code, and I think that works pretty well. And then we do have the process to say, I was contributing in some way that isn't captured through Git. I should vote. Christoph?
I just wanted to add that I served as election officer this last cycle, so I was involved in looking through the exception requests that came in. We approved almost all of them because we looked for like, hey, can you tell us like how are you attached to this project? We engage in a conversation with the person that's asking for an exception. Like, talk to us about how you're engaged in the project, because the goal is to make sure that the people who are voting are involved and invested in the community and understand what's going on. So we looked through, we had conversations. There was only a couple that we ended up actually turning down because people legitimately were not involved in the project. But yeah, we looked at like both everything in Git as well as stuff off of Git. If you are only participating in a forum that somehow is not tracked in Git, and there were a couple examples of that, we did look at that, consider that, and if it kind of measured up that it, you were involved enough in the project, we approved those exceptions.
Okay. Thanks a lot. We have 3 minutes left. I don't think that's enough time to answer any of the remaining questions. I'm gonna copy them over to the next call so that we can make sure that all of them are covered. And with that, thank you very much all for today, and enjoy the rest of your day, and see you next time. Bye, folks.
Later, everyone.
Thanks all.